But it just dawned on me that, if the students could come to class and have that more drilly rote learned bit finished, then our class could just purely be used for, the good stuff, the stuff that they couldn't really do without a teacher. If you're, let's say your lesson is, animals or something like that, right? And the kids come to class and they already know those animals, they can say them, they can spell them or whatever. Then what do you do with your hour in class?
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Inside Japan podcast, which is sponsored by Jobs in Japan, the best place on the internet to find your next job in Japan. I'm Charlie, and on this episode, I'm speaking with Adam Kardos, the owner of English Access, who's created a fun interactive game for kids to learn English. We talk about the failure of the grammar translation method, how kids actually learn languages, and Adam's audacious goal of getting rote learning out of the classroom so that teachers can spend their time meaningfully connecting the dots with students. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about why you started Gamerized Dictionary.
Gamerized Dictionary, the name is dictionary, so it is essentially a dictionary, but it doesn't look anything like a dictionary. I'd call it a gamified learner dictionary, and it's something that teachers can use with their students, or schools can use with their students. They can assign vocabulary or sentence lists to their students. It's got voice recognition, spaced repetition, AI reviews, and it essentially sends, when the kids get the assignments from teachers, they go on a short little sequence of games, which we call an adventure. That's basically what it does. So it teaches mainly vocabulary and sentences, basic grammar patterns, and that kind of thing. But it's a very flexible kind of solution. It's not like a course, which is a program. So that's kind of an important thing of it.
Yeah, that's good, because I think I've seen the kinds of things that I saw when I was trying to learn Japanese from video games, because that was like my first thought, like, okay, if there's a video game out there that can help me with this. And it was just a lot of, kind of like RPG mechanics or something, and then a word flies up out of context with no,
right,
like, or a hiragana thing, and if you can write down what it is in English letters, then
right,
you get the point. And it's like, but it doesn't really help you with functional language use. I don't really know how to use a lot of those things.
yeah.
Or if I see that thing in another context, I might not recognize it.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot out there that kind of works with translations, because that's a kind of a quick and easy way to do it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Just matching meanings to words. So what Gamerized Dictionary isn't, and this is, again, as a lead into your question, I think this is an important part. It's not a way to learn an entire language. We didn't design this thinking people will use this and they'll learn a language. We think it's a support tool, and I'm a strong believer in that, especially for kids. They shouldn't be, trying to get all of their needs from one app or one program or whatever. It's a part. It helps with part of the puzzle, I'd say, put it that way. But like, I guess my road to kind of developing Gamerized Dictionary, my background in teaching, what I really kind of believe in, I did my Delta Module 3 in CLIL, so Content and Language Learning, Integrated Learning, for anyone who doesn't know, where you teach subjects through English rather than teaching English itself, and you get this kind of synergistic effect of learning language and content. And also, our company AS Press has written a lot of graded readers, and we've made courses that are story-based, that are very holistic. So I'm really interested in holistic learning, especially for children, not learning a language one word and one grammar point at a time.
Which is kind of the often the Japanese approach in junior high schools and high schools is very grammar first, and I think a lot of this comes from sort of the Noam Chomsky sort of old style. It's a very old style of understanding how we understand language, how we acquire language. And actually a lot of the more modern techniques and a lot of the more modern philosophies of education focus more on like, how do we learn language as children, because we don't get it from this sort of like understanding grammar directly and translating it into our base language. Children kind of have an inbuilt grammar. So if you look at Creole languages,
right.
that's super interesting stuff. Like that, there are languages where, so a Creole language, for people who aren't aware, is kind of an invented language that's kind of naturally occurring. So like a group of people from different places come together, they learn, they point to the same thing and come up with the same words for it. And what will happen is one generation to the next is that the first generation maybe will come up with the words for this. So instead of, bottle or something, they'll say blue. And then all of the people recognize, okay, so this is a blue now. And then the next generation will create, it's like, because they've learned it from a young age, they create a grammar structure around it. So grammar seems to be like this naturally occurring thing
Right.
in human culture, which is fascinating. So it's not like you have to really teach it directly, because children will pull it together from somewhere in their own brains. It's like something that we're naturally good at.
Absolutely. I mean, we're already off on a massive kind of off course here, but I need to respond to that, because that's definitely really interesting. And
I
and
love
it
talking about this stuff. So go ahead.
goes very much along with my kind of understanding of how children learn language and some of the kind of problems in the industry, and how they're not kind of giving young learners what they need. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we look at the way children learn, if we look at, broadly speaking, learning versus acquisition, right? So learning, acquisition learning is something that's kind of a natural process that happens with a lot of meaningful input, right? And children up until roughly around 11, 12, 13 years old, really have quite a high potential, still have a lot of neuroplasticity and this great potential for language acquisition. And it's right around the early teen years where that kind of drops off, and the capacity for abstract thought, or learning rather, skyrockets. These two kind of like interchange, right? So when we shouldn't really be teaching adults and children in the same way, which I think most people would agree with. But if you do look at the standard course books for children on the market, you still see essentially a grammar syllabus. And if you look at language acquisition, we know that like grammar morphemes, are acquired. There is a predictable order that they're acquired in, but it has nothing to do with what the course books say. Like, for example, the third person S is something that course books will spend several units on for kids, right? Some of the major books out there. But the third person S is something that they're probably not going to acquire until much later on. They'll be learning, regular, irregular past before that, probably. So, trying to kind of force create a system that, teaches everything in a certain order and teach it in that order to children. I think it actually does work. So I'm not going to completely refute what everyone else has done, but I don't think it works for the reasons that they think it does. They might think that children are learning these, and then they'll be able to kind of piece together the grammar and vocabulary to express things in their mind, which I've seen fail so many times. But I think what it does do is it does make them more able to notice the grammar patterns or whatever, and then through the meaningful stuff, like what I would see in CLIL or extensive reading or that kind of thing, they'll have more chances to notice these things, and they'll acquire it more quickly through that. But just the grammar syllabus by itself, it's kind of going against children's natural way of learning, right?
That's very interesting. So I'm wondering whether your principles behind Gamerise Dictionary come from a similar sort of place, where it's like, this isn't going to be some kind of grammar translation method. It's going to be that sort of more comprehensible input, something that they can basically understand without having to have too many priors. You can you can point to something, and then like when the kid points to it and says the same thing in the classroom as you would, that is a way to build up a language base, even though they might have, and I almost never use Japanese in my classroom. Like I only use it if something the child is doing is unsafe. And that's because you've got to keep them safe, right? But I don't use Japanese at all in the classroom, and I found that what happens is the kids go like, okay, so I can't go back onto Japanese, I can't rely on Japanese. And so eventually, and it takes a long time sometimes, but eventually they go like, okay, so I'm not going to use Japanese in the class because I don't think my teacher will understand it or listen to me. But I wonder if the way you think of it for Gamerise Dictionary is to focus on something that they can just pick up without having to have priors.
Okay, so the answer is a little bit long to that, and I'll get there soon, hopefully. But
Okay.
so it is kind of a tool for rote learning. It isn't a tool that does the part of language learning that you would get through extensive reading or communication or task-based learning or that kind of thing. What it does is it supports those things. So yeah, I mean, going back again, so obviously I'm interested in CLIL, story-based learning, this more holistic approach to teaching. And through different things that I've luckily been able to do in the last 10 years or so, visiting other schools, training teachers, looking at different contexts. Having spoken to you before, I think you've seen quite a few different contexts as well. I think you mentioned international school, working at Yochiens and Eikaiwas and stuff like that. So I've had a chance to see a lot of those things as well. And one of the things that there's two things that I would see that I always found a bit frustrating. And one is that a lot of time is spent in class doing essentially drilling, where kids are repeating language. They're just sort of identifying things and saying the phrases, saying the words over and over again. Often through games, which is nice, but not necessarily meaningful games. Sort of games that are just there to get them to kind of drill in the language. And yeah, I mean, I think that's all valuable. But the two things that I had a problem with there, one is that takes up all of the class or most of it. So if we think about the fact that children need, I mean, one of the key ingredients I think we can agree is time, right? Children, an hour a week just drilling a few phrases is not going to get them very far. We know that if you take a child and you put them, abroad, a Japanese child, you put them in the United States or something for in about a year, they're going to come up with some pretty native sounding language abilities, right? Again, due to their natural abilities to acquire language. But yeah, so too much of the drilling and stuff like that in class and not enough of the kind of meaningful practice, right? So so I guess what really got me to the point of saying, okay, I'm going to actually make something, was a couple years ago when we did, so when the pandemic just first started, right? Like everybody, our school got forced online. And I will admit right away, I didn't really like teaching children online. Teaching adults is great. Teaching children poses a whole slew of challenges. One being it's very hard to kind of engage them. And the other thing is that the lessons seem to move really, really slowly. And I would often, in order to kind of get to some kind of speaking task, I would have to sort of teach them some vocabulary, some phrases that they needed. And then by the time I finished that, there was like 10 minutes left for actual, communication and speaking practice. And, I started to experiment with, try to adapt however I could. I checked out tools like Kahoot or Bamboozle. I've known like Quizlet and stuff like that from before. But it just dawned on me that, if the students could come to class and have that more drilly rote learned bit finished, then our class could just purely be used for, the good stuff, the stuff that they couldn't really do without a teacher. So yeah, that was the main thing. And I mean, it's true for online, but it's true for live classes as well. If you're, let's say your lesson is, animals or something like that, right? And the kids come to class and they already know those animals, they can say them, they can spell them or whatever. Then what do you do with your hour in class?
That's super interesting because I've as a teacher for a long time, I've spent a lot of time, with flashcards, like, drilling
Right.
kids on words. And that's often one of the things where the lesson, I'm not going to say it falls apart, but I'm saying that for some age groups, especially younger age groups, like I have a rule that for every year old the child is, that's about how long they can concentrate on something.
Oh, okay,
And
interesting.
so a 3-year-old, I picked up a few side gigs and stuff, and I'm teaching some 3-4-year-olds now. And you can do card drilling for a few moments, and then after a little while the kid's just like, okay, what else is going on? Like
Yeah, right.
they lose concentration. So that's interesting that there are ways that you could do that with something like Gamerized Dictionary outside of the class, and then when they come to class they already know the words, so you can go straight into using them in context or finding ways to sort of use them in a different way. So what kind of feedback have you gotten from like teachers and parents and other people using this app? Have they found that they use it the same way as you do? Or is there like a whole bunch of different ways that, like, maybe divergent ways that you're finding out from people, like, oh yeah, this is how we use it. And you're
Yeah,
like, I never thought of that, you know?
right. Yeah, no, that's kind of the cool thing that I'm finding is definitely schools are kind of finding their own way of using it. And there's loads of different kind of variations of it. One of the things I'm seeing a lot lately is actually schools, language schools in particular, eikaiwas that would have either like a gakudo program or just kind of like a drop-in program. So instead of having a teacher, I mean, I think teachers do a lot of great things for kids, but you don't have to have a teacher like over your shoulder all the time, right? There's so much kids should and can do on their own. But they'll have like a room where the kids have access to a library. They've got tablets with Gamerized Dictionary and a few other things like that. And then they might move around to stations or have some sort of some choice of what kind of activities they do.
It sounds kind of like a Montessori style. That's something that I did a lot when I was a Montessori teacher.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the whole idea of learning stations is that comes from Montessori.
I think that comes from Montessori, yes, and I think it's been adapted for other methods as well.
Yeah, I mean that's been really cool to see. Using it in conjunction with reading, like something like Raz Kids or whatever. Often with graded reading in Japan, it's just quite popular, and I think is a great method. Essentially, in graded, I mean, if you go by the rote like the theory itself, you shouldn't really be using a dictionary or really studying vocabulary as you're doing graded reading. But for a lot of I mean, a lot of the reading resources that are available to kids in Japan, the vocabulary level tends to kind of explode a little too quickly. So by giving them a certain amount of like exposure to reading and writing the words in isolation before going into some reading, then they're able to get through that, and then that's where the kind of the rote learning of the vocabulary gets the meaning added to it. They get that out of the way, and that gives them access to be able to do more reading and maybe talking about the books and that sort of thing. We did a summer event with a programming school called ProgLab, which I think are fairly well known, at an elementary school. And we had 40 students join this three one-day events, so it was just 1 day per group. And we did programming and robotics in English. And in order for them to actually be able to do the tasks like talk together, design things, and then the final task that they were leading up to in this camp was that they would make a robotic zoo. They'd make animal robots and then program a car to go around their zoo, and then actually give a spoken tour to the school principal, who was posing as a foreign dignitary, all in English. And in order for them to do that, obviously there's a lot of vocabulary, there's a lot of phrases, simply things like what should we do next, or I think it should turn left here, those kinds of chunks that would help them to actually communicate about it. So for about 3 weeks before the camp, they studied a list of about 50 vocabulary items, some of were phrases. And after completing that, we did the event. And what was really cool about it was they used English the whole time. Otherwise, if we were, there's no way you can get through 50 items of vocabulary for like in a lesson, right? It's just impossible. But they came already having done all of that. We could check it on the analytics. We could see that everybody had done it. And boom, we just went into it. And yep, they used the phrases, they spoke together. It was a really neat event.
That's really cool, because it's something that you can use as a support tool. Like you said, it's not something that's like, I think people have this imagination that every tech tool is something that's going to replace the teacher, which I think is kind of an absurd proposition. It's like, it's as if any language learning tool could like replace your mother or something,
Right.
Where you're learning your language from. But I do wonder about, because research that I've read like a while ago was suggesting that things like video games and videos and multimedia kinds of ways of learning language, if the child is doing them by themselves, they don't necessarily understand how to put it into context. Like they might even say words, but just not really understand how to use it, not really get any meaningful feedback from it, because at the end of the day, it's like a video or a game that's like mimicking, a human experience, and it doesn't quite get there. So
Right.
what do you do about people who are thinking that maybe they can just replace a teacher with, oh, okay, just take an iPad, that kid's going to learn English no problem by themselves, and the teacher can just sit there on their phone or something while the kid is playing with an iPad? Like, is there, how do you find a way to use it, and also make sure that the people who are using your apps use them properly?
Wow. Okay, that is a good question. And I mean, I completely agree that it shouldn't be, again, like as we said at the outset, it isn't something that you can learn a language completely through by itself. So my hope, I mean, if I'm to sort of say it in a kind of more of a lofty way, I might be going a little bit off topic, but I'll try to come back. Is that, I mean, I'd like this to have the impact of changing education for young learners in Japan. In that, I really want to get the if the class that you tend to run is just rote learning and you're just doing, drilling words and phrases or whatever and not doing anything else, we want to get that essentially automated, get the kids doing that on their own. And then it just makes the class, then you really need to, the teachers are going to need to think, okay, well, what do we do next? That's already kind of done. And I'm hoping that it's not, more rote learning. Hopefully they're not just kind of moving ahead, they're doing other things with it. But I mean, I guess so far there's probably about, we're still in the early stages. We really just kind of launched in this April, I would say. We have about 17 schools that are using it. One is an elementary school. Most of them are Eikaiwas at the moment. And most of them I've had the chance to, I mean, they'll contact me and we'll have a discussion about it, and I'll find out about their situation and discuss kind of what would be a good use case for them. And in most cases, I'm finding, I'm trying to encourage them to connect it to something that they're doing, and not kind of use that as a tool by itself. And yeah, so I mean, I think that's the ultimate thing, is that it really just needs to be connected to something else. In fact, what we have found is that when there isn't something else connected to it, the retention on the app is not that high. We did a beta test group again with the students at the program at ProGlab last year, where we just had 20 students, and we said, okay, use it and find bugs, give us feedback, and that sort of thing. And out of 20, I think one of them continued to use it for the rest of the year, but the other ones kind of gradually stopped. And I think the main reason was they didn't really know what content to pick. They didn't really have a reason for it, because it isn't like a set course, right? Something like
Duolingo or something.
Duolingo, I mean, that's a good one to pick up. Yeah, that's a course, right? I mean,
right.
There's no, what do I do next? It's just you keep following that straight line. Where we don't really have that as much. There are, I mean, whatever everyone thinks about Aiken or tests, I mean, that's personal opinion, and I'm not going to say that I'm big on those myself. But we do have the content for all of those tests. So if a student does sort of go like, okay, I have a goal, I want to pass Aiken level 3, they can plow through that content and hopefully be doing reading and test prep as well.
The important part of that is, because you have this product that you've created that has a specific goal, right? Is that you want to help kids to learn a lot of the words outside of class, so that class time can be spent in a more meaningful way.
Right.
And I can understand if a teacher might see this tool and without knowing your educational philosophy behind it or how you intend to use it, it might just be like, okay, well, that can take up 20 minutes of class time if I'm, if I haven't prepped properly and I just want to kids' attention for a little bit, like I can just whip out the iPad and then, okay, here you go, kids, go do your thing. So how do you help people who are using this app, newly using it, to sort of integrate it properly into their curriculum so it's actually providing the function that it's supposed to do?
Okay. A couple of things. First of all, I do talking about actually using it in class. The elementary school that's using it now does use it in class. And what I would say, in a sense, I think Gamerise Dictionary does a better job of the kids learning like target language or whatever, than doing it as a group of 40 students at an elementary school. And one of the reasons is differentiation. You can have, you know, in a group of 40 students, easily have 5 or 6 different content. I mean, in any given elementary school class, I think you said that you had taught at elementary schools as well, yeah?
Yeah, I've taught some elementary school age kids as well, yeah.
You in an elementary school class in Japan, typically you're going to have a huge range of levels, right? You're going to have some kids that just know nothing about English, some kids that have lived abroad, you know, some that are, you know, pretty serious about studying and that kind of thing. And especially, you know, a lot of foreigners I know have their kids who speak fluent English in Japanese elementary schools, and that's like, what do you do during English time? You know, it's like, yeah, we did what was it, banana janakute banana.
Yeah.
What does a native speaker child kind of do in a class like that? It must be, you know, humiliating. But you know, the teachers are able to kind of give very different content to them, and because they're learning it on their own, getting immediate feedback on their own pronunciation, error correction, you know, whether it's spelling or whatever, they'll know right away that they've made a mistake and get a second chance to finish it. It does that job actually better than, you know, the drilling in class. So that's still not really the answer to your question, but it was something I want to pick up. And then making sure that they're actually using it in the way that it's intended, I guess. So I mean, the main thing would really be they do, if it's used on a larger scale, like at an elementary school or an English school or something like that, we do usually start, well, we always start with a consultation, and that's essentially how we kind of talk through how they might use it. We also do customize quite a lot of content for bigger schools. Often they'll say, oh, we're using this book, you know, they're taking this test, they're doing that or whatever. And we'll try to put together custom content for them, and then also help them with assigning and that sort of thing. So I mean, there's quite a lot of support in the beginning. As we get bigger, that might be kind of difficult to sustain. So that's a really good question that you raise. I'll have to kind of think through that. Do you have any suggestions for that? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this afterwards. It might be worth creating some sort of online, you know, how to use our course kind of videos, you know, like a structured video series that you can put on YouTube or something. So anyone who uses the app can go, oh, okay, I didn't realize you can't just like give the kid the iPad and let them go like do whatever they want. Like maybe you should integrate it into your curriculum somehow and then use, you know, this one for this lesson and this one for this lesson. But yeah, and I guess because you've just started recently, like there's probably a sort of a first focus that you have. I wonder if you're planning, because as you said, that younger kids maybe learn in a different way than older kids. Older kids are more capable of abstract thought. So do you, is this also useful for older children who are learning, you know, because I've taught junior high school kids who it's their first, you know, maybe they've done a little bit of English language education at elementary school now, but yeah, they have very little English ability. Is this something that you would still use for older kids as well?
By older kids, do you mean like early teens?
Yeah, early teens, like junior high school or high school age, like for kids who are maybe behind a little bit or who have started English recently and they're not really that confident in it.
Yeah, so our target age is really grade 1 to 6 is kind of what we planned for. I'm not a huge fan of kids younger than 6 years old spending a lot of time on a tablet.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're mostly shooting for elementary school. We're definitely finding grade 3, 4, 5, 6 as a really strong. The kids really kind of use it the most consistent. Some of the students that have been using it since we first started developing it, you know, have been using it consistently for over a year and have studied a couple thousand words.
Wow.
Are kind of in that age range. We did some research and some surveying on teenagers, because we were trying to really figure out what our target was when we were first designing it, and we were luckily able to survey an entire junior high school and high school, and we did a kind of a mood board thing with you know, the RPG gamified looking app, and then something that was a lot more stripped down and more serious looking, right? We asked them, which one would you prefer to use and why? And interestingly, in grade 1 of junior high school, that was really popular. More than 80% chose the very gamified looking app. That drops quite quickly around Chusang, like grade 3 of junior high school, where it gets more like around 50-50. And then interestingly, in the first year of high school, it goes up again.
Oh, interesting.
And then gradually goes down. And what we've kind of figured out is that the proximity of entrance exams really much changes very much the thinking and the goals and stuff of the students, right?
There's kind of like a level of seriousness about their study, and also I think a level of familiarity, right? If they're just like, okay, if I can just get my little, red sheet of paper or like my red see-through thing, put it on the book, learn all of these vocabulary words and check them, then maybe I can pass the test.
Yes.
And that maybe that is more important to them than actually learning English, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, no, I think the gamification starts to be seen as more of like a barrier. It's like it just gets in the way. They just want to kind of get it out. So, but definitely great. I mean, we do have a lot of teenagers and grade, first year or second year that use it and are really into it. But yeah, it could be a bit slower. It is different. Like I like that you mentioned the idea of using the what is it called? That red sheet and.
Yeah, I don't know what that's called, but I tried that for Japanese and I got bored of it in like 5 minutes. But I see kids on the train doing that all the time, like covering the words with that little red sheet. And the book is actually printed in like red type, so it's easier for the kids to just do that. And I've never really understood it to be honest myself, because for me, rote learning words like that has never worked. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean it has worked a lot for me. I mean, I when I first learned Japanese, I managed to pass JLPT level 1 in about 3 years from arriving in Japan, and I'd studied a massive amount of flashcards. But the thing is, I did. Obviously, I had lots of other opportunities to use it, and I mean, it's in Japan, right? So there was more than just that rote learning. And I also kind of stumbled across spaced repetition at the time, which I didn't know about it, but I kind of had a system where I'd kind of mark my cards and sort them, and if I made mistakes, I'd put them in this pile. I was super geeky about it. But spaced repetition is one thing that obviously works really, really well. I would think that most of those kids, if they're studying before that week's vocabulary test, chances are 80% of those words will be forgotten the following week, right? So yeah, that's definitely a piece of it.
Yeah. Adam, it's been absolutely fantastic to talk with you about this. I'm really interested to see how the Gamerise dictionary, how it improves and how it reaches more people. I'm also hoping for your success in changing the way Japanese education does these kind of things, because I'm also kind of tired of the sort of boring, rote, grammar focused education, and I would love to see Japanese people more able to speak and understand and use English. So I'm hoping for your success as well. So where can people find out more about Gamerise Dictionary and what you do?
Just check out gamerise-dictionary.com. That would be the site for schools or for institutions, and you'll find lots of information, a few videos on there. And then if you're interested in contacting us to set up a trial at your school or with a group of students, just fill out the application form there, and we'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode and you like what we're doing with Inside Japan, please consider going to iTunes and giving us a 5-star rating and sharing this episode with a friend who you think it might be useful for. As always, a huge thank you to JobsinJapan.com for sponsoring this podcast, and if you're looking for our other episodes, you can find them there, and keep us in mind next time you're looking for work in Japan. Thanks so much for listening, and see you again soon.